Hey y'all, in this video today I'm going to show you how to mount a scope, so we're going to jump right into it. The first thing that you're going to do is determine where these base rings are going to sit on your weapon. So put them where you think they're going to go, and then you're going to set your scope in there. And this is just a general spot right now. What we're trying to do is figure out our eye relief. So what I want to happen is right when I come up to the weapon, I look down the scope, I want to see a good sight picture. I don't want to see black around the edges of the scope. So I look through it. If it's not quite where I want it to be, I may have to move these rings forward or backwards, or move my scope forward or backwards inside the rings. On this weapon, I kind of already know where it's going to go. So right here, come down to it, good sight picture. So I know that's where my rings are going to be at. And now I'm going to take my scope off. So I know this is where I want my rings to be. I'm going to go ahead and tighten those down. Whenever I do this, I always use blue Loctite. So I'm going to remove these screws one at a time. And I'm going to put blue Loctite on each one. So what I'll do is I'll get the Loctite on there, and then I'll get it in about a quarter of the way, and I'll do that on all four of these. All right, I'm at the point now where I'm going to go ahead and tighten the screws on the base rings. Check your owner's manual for whatever scope you're using to find out the specs. These are usually in inch pounds. So for this particular scope and ring setup, it's 35 inch pounds. So I have my torque wrench here. I'm going to go to 35. Right there, 35. And that's what I'm going to tighten these down to. All right, now my base rings are mounted. I'm ready to move on to the next step. Okay, now that the base rings are locked in place, I need to level the rifle before I put the scope on it. So you can use just about any level that works, anything you have, set it on the rifle. You want to make sure that it's level. You can also set it on here, but I don't like to do that because I'm going to use two levels. I'm going to put one on the scope and I'm going to put one on the rifle. So I'm going to grab my first level here and I'm going to adjust this until it's level. All right, so now I'm going to show you what that looks like. My rifle is level. Now at this point, I can go ahead and set the scope on there in the same spot that it was before, where I know my eye relief is good. Gotta be careful, try not to knock the rifle off its level. All right, that looks good. Now I'm going to take my second level and I'm going to put it on the scope. Now I got to keep in mind whenever you move the scope, try not to move the rifle. So I'm going to move the scope here, get it level. I'll keep an eye on my other one. Okay, now my scope is level. So you can see here, the scope is level. And under here is a little bit harder to see, but my rifle is level. So, leveled up here, leveled down there. Now I can go ahead and put my top rings on for the scope. Once again, I gotta be careful. You gotta be careful when you're doing this. Just make sure that the rifle and the scope don't move. The easiest way to do it is to keep the levels on here the whole time. So if anything moves, you can go back and reset. Same with the base rings. I'm going to be using blue Loctite on all 8 of these screws. The only difference is I torque these down to 35 inch pounds because that's what the manual said. Up here, my manual said for these to use 18 inch pounds, so that's what I'm going to use. All right, now I got my blue Loctite on and all my screws are semi-set in place. I'm gonna adjust my torque wrench down to 18 pounds. There it goes into focus. So I've got it at 18 pounds. I'm gonna go ahead and torque all these down, kind of the same way that you would do your vehicle. So I'm gonna go in an X. So I'll go back right, upper left, front right, back left. Now I'm going really slow and being careful here to make sure that I don't knock off any of my levels. Another note here, something that I like to keep in mind. You see that there's a gap right here. I like to keep the gap on this side and on the other side exactly the same, so that one side isn't cranked down all the way and touching, and then the other side's really open. I want to keep those the same. Okay, so I got my top rings all torqued down to 18 inch-pounds like the manual says. Carefully go back and make sure that none of my levels moved. Everything looks good. All right, and that's how you mount the scope. So once you're done mounting it, go back and double check your eye relief. Make sure that it looks good. You still have a full sight picture. And the reason for the levels was just to make sure that when you look down the scope, the reticle is directly vertical. That's why we do the levels. So it's not canted left or right. And then it's easier for you to make adjustments when you're out on the range or when you're out hunting. So this one turned out really good. It's all to spec, got my blue Loctite on there, and that's how you mount a scope. Now, you can, if you want to, put a level on your scope. I do that for a lot of my long range scopes, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this on here. So if you are gonna mount a level on here, this is how you'll do it. Put a level on top of the scope, make sure it's good, and then you'll adjust this until it's level. Tighten it down. And there it is. Yeah, if you're gonna mount one of these, you just need to put a level on the scope, marry these two up where they're both level. And that's it, that's how you mount a scope. If you learned something today, like the video and subscribe to our channels, and we'll see y'all next time.